Throughout the history of modern warfare, there have been moments for which no one has ever found a reasonable explanation. Strange encounters with creatures that appear in no military file and in no biology book. Today, we're going to look into 5 of these stories, from the jungles of Vietnam to the skies over Germany, down to the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, and out to the icy lakes of Russia. Each one is connected to war, but not a war between humans. But first, you'll have incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. The rock apes of the Vietnamese jungle. Of all the things American soldiers faced during the Vietnam War, some never made it into any official report. They weren't in the training manuals. They weren't discussed over the radio, and no one could explain them with any real certainty. And yet, for many soldiers, they were some of the most terrifying things they ever witnessed. In the mid-1960s, as the US began ramping up operations in the mountainous jungles of central Vietnam, the Pentagon launched a campaign known as the Defoliation Program, an effort to strip the jungle bare using chemicals. One of the most infamous of these was Agent Orange, a compound sprayed over millions of acres to destroy vegetation, cripple the ecosystem, and rob guerrilla fighters of their natural cover in the dense tropical canopy. But as the forest was stripped away by chemicals, American troops began noticing something strange. From the shadows of collapsing trees, something began to emerge. At first, only a handful of reports came in, isolated mentions from reconnaissance teams operating deep in the bush. But then came the stories shared between units. Stories of large, shadowy figures moving in small groups, throwing rocks at American soldiers before vanishing back into the trees as if they had never been there at all. The soldiers called them rock apes, a name that sounded simple, maybe even a little ridiculous, but was always spoken with a seriousness that was hard to ignore. One veteran from the 101st Airborne Division later wrote in his memoir, "I saw them more than once. They weren't human, but they weren't exactly animals either, about the size of a large man, covered in thick hair with fierce-looking faces, not like Bigfoot, but not like anything I'd ever seen. They moved in pairs or threes, showed up both during the day and at night, and more than once, they set off our trip flares without leaving a single trace behind." What made things even stranger was that these encounters didn't just happen in one place. Multiple platoons, stationed in completely different regions, reported nearly identical descriptions. Same build, same behavior, same unsettling way they would watch American soldiers from the cover of the trees. Some tried to explain it. One theory was that the rock apes were just native primates, perhaps a species of giant gibbon, yet to be classified, forced to flee deeper into the jungle as their habitat was destroyed. Others suggested it was a kind of shared psychological reaction. Under the constant stress of combat, perhaps the soldiers had started imagining things, seeing what wasn't really there. But some believed the rock apes were real, that they had lived in the depths of the jungle for thousands of years, undisturbed and unknown, until the war and the onslaught of chemicals forced them into the open. What seemed certain was this: they didn't behave like wild animals. They watched, and they acted with purpose. Some soldiers laughed when they told these stories. Others chose never to speak of them again, because in the jungles of Vietnam, there were things that even war couldn't explain. Foo Fighters, the invisible pursuers in the skies of World War II. Amid the fire and fury of World War II, when the world shook under bombs and skies were torn apart by brutal dogfights, history has remembered the heroic pilots, the screaming engines over Europe, and the deadly chases between German, American, British, and Japanese warplanes. But behind the battles that made it into the history books, there were other encounters, ones that no one has ever fully explained. In late 1944, as the war entered its bloodiest phase on the European front, the 415th Night Fighter Squadron of the U.S. Army Air Forces was stationed in the Rhine Valley, near the border of France and Germany. During what should have been a routine mission, pilots began to spot strange lights in the sky. Lights they would later describe as glowing orange orbs, hovering in perfect formation, like flares frozen in place. At first, they assumed it was some kind of German aerial trap or signal beacon. But when one of the planes turned to intercept, the lights vanished instantly, gone in the blink of an eye. From that moment on, the lights began to appear more frequently, not just over France and Germany, but across the skies of Britain, Belgium, and the Netherlands. They seemed to fly alongside American squadrons, sometimes even circling the aircraft as if watching them or playing with them. At first, U.S. intelligence suspected they were some kind of Nazi superweapon, maybe an advanced surveillance drone or a high-tech jamming device. But after numerous investigations, military analysts found no evidence that the Axis powers possessed anything close to the capabilities needed to explain what pilots were seeing. In one report, Lieutenant Krasny described a chilling encounter. While flying over the Alsace region, he spotted a cylindrical object, wingless, the size of a city bus, glowing with a faint red light, flying parallel to his aircraft. Krasny immediately performed evasive maneuvers, but the object maintained its distance perfectly, as if it could predict his every move. After several tense minutes, the object abruptly changed color, then shot off into the night sky, so fast that even the radar system couldn't track it. It was no longer an isolated phenomenon. In fact, the strange lights appeared so often that pilots started calling them by a new name: Foo Fighters. Declassified U.S. Air Force documents revealed that Foo Fighters had been reported over 250 times in just a single year, but to this day, no official explanation has ever been given. They never attacked, they never sent signals, and they never left behind a single piece of physical evidence. And for many of the pilots who encountered them, that, more than anything else, is what made them so terrifying. Rujin, the sea dragon that stopped the mightiest empire on Earth. When people in the West think of dragons, they often picture flying beasts that breathe fire, hoard gold, and guard treasure-filled caves littered with bones. But in Asia, dragons hold a very different meaning. In Japanese culture, dragons are symbols of wisdom, power, and are often associated not with fire, but with the sea. In the years 1274 and again in 1281, the Mongol Empire under Kublai Khan launched massive invasions of Japan. With hundreds of warships and tens of thousands of soldiers, the Mongols believed that conquering a small island nation like Japan was a foregone conclusion. But in both attempts, their armies never even set foot on shore. The reason, recorded in both Japanese chronicles and Mongolian documents, was a phenomenon known as kamikaze, or divine wind. Sudden and violent ocean storms struck the Mongol fleet, sinking ships, drowning thousands of soldiers, and sending the survivors fleeing in terror. From that moment on, the Japanese believed their gods had intervened, that nature itself had risen to protect them in their hour of greatest need. But buried within ancient records, alongside vivid descriptions of fierce storms and towering waves, are smaller details that appear again and again. Some claimed to have seen a creature larger than any warship, rising from the deep, writhing through the crashing waves, and unleashing a roar so powerful it brought men to their knees in fear. No one recorded its exact form. Some called it a sea dragon. Others called it a guardian spirit of the nation. Modern historians often dismiss this as myth, chalking it up to religious metaphor or mass hysteria. But if you examine ancient nautical maps and cross-reference them with oral stories from Kyushu fishermen, the name Rujin might not be so easily explained away. For generations, fishermen told of a time when the sea would boil, as if something massive was breathing just below the surface. There were moments, they said, when long, shadowy shapes, dozens of meters in length, would skim just beneath the waves, disappearing the moment someone spotted them. Of course, to this day, there is no conclusive evidence that Rujin ever existed. But what makes Rujin such a strange and compelling part of history isn't whether it was real. It's the idea that maybe, just maybe, it was the reason Japan remained standing, while the rest of the world trembled under the hooves of the Mongol Empire. The Lake Brosno monster, the motionless shadow beneath Russian waters. Deep in the forests of western Russia, far from any major road, lies a place that locals avoid mentioning after dark. Lake Brosno, though it spans less than 10 kilometers across, is home to a legend that has persisted for nearly 8 centuries. A legend about something that lives in the dark waters below. In the summer of 1240, a Mongol Tatar force, fresh off a campaign that had left several northern cities in ruins, paused at Lake Brosno to set up camp. They led their horses down to the water to drink, unaware of what might be waiting beneath the surface. According to accounts passed down through the generations, the water began to churn, bubbles rose to the surface, and then, without warning, something surged up from the depths and pulled dozens of horses under. It could have been nothing more than myth, a way for the Russian people to explain a surprising victory. But if that were the case, why did something eerily similar happen over 700 years later? In 1943, as German forces pushed through the region during World War II, an event was quietly recorded, one that mirrored the ancient tale. According to unofficial reports, a German reconnaissance unit was dispatched to survey Lake Brosno after rumors spread that the Russians were hiding troops or equipment in the area. The first night passed without incident, but by dawn the next day, one of the inflatable rafts used for scouting had vanished. No one could say for sure what happened, but some longtime residents of the region offered a warning. When the water goes still, more still than it should be, and there's no wind in the air, that's when you stay away from the shore. The creature at the heart of this legend goes by many names. Some call it the Brosnya. Others believe it to be the last remnant of an ancient Slavic dragon, slumbering at the bottom of the lake, only waking when humans venture too close. In the 1990s, researchers attempted to scan the lakebed using radar, but every time they reached the center of the lake, the equipment malfunctioned. They recorded large, unexplained movements in the water, but could never determine what caused them. In a world that grows more explainable by the day, where science and reason shine light into even the darkest corners, Lake Brosno remains still, like a dark ink blot on the map of Russia that refuses to fade. The U-28 creature, a prehistoric phantom beneath the waves of war. Naval warfare has always been different from the battles fought on land, and when a ship sinks beneath the ocean's surface, it almost never returns. On July 30th, 1915, at the height of World War I, the German Imperial Navy's U-boat, U-28, was patrolling the waters off the coast of Ireland when it encountered a British-flagged steamer. Under the command of Kapitän-Leutnant Georg Gunther von Forstner, the crew fired a torpedo. The Iberian was struck, split in two, and began to sink. It was a routine kill until something strange began to happen. In the official report, filed after the incident, signed by Forstner himself, he wrote, "At the exact moment the wreck of the Iberian slipped beneath the surface, an underwater explosion from within the ship sent water and debris flying into the air, and through the spray and smoke we saw something we could not explain. It thrashed amidst the wreckage, its back arched like that of a massive crocodile. It was at least 20 meters long. Its body was elongated, with limbs like the flippers of a sea turtle, a narrow head resembling a crocodile's snout, and a long, tapering tail that whipped through the air as if to keep its balance. The sighting lasted less than 20 seconds before the creature vanished into the deep, never to be seen again. But this wasn't the first time such a beast had been spoken of. As far back as the 13th century, sailors from Scandinavia recorded legends of a sea monster known only as the Whale Eater, a creature as long as a ship with axe-like teeth and the strength to drag a full-grown whale into the depths with a single bite. Modern-day cryptozoologists have speculated that the creature could be a surviving descendant of a long-extinct branch of marine reptile, the pliosaur, a massive predator that once roamed the oceans during the Jurassic period and was thought to have vanished 65 million years ago. Such ideas were ridiculed until August 2012. That year, a whale carcass washed ashore near St. Austell, England. Along its head was a single, enormous bite mark, one that nearly spanned half the creature's skull. The teeth marks were deep, curved, and arched into a wide U-shape. They resembled the jaws of a crocodile, but on a scale many times larger. Some believe it was the mark of the whale eater, and the most terrifying part isn't that a prehistoric predator might still exist in the depths of our oceans. It's the possibility that it never really went extinct at all. It simply sank deep enough that we stopped seeing it, and it's been waiting ever since for someone to wake it up. Even though the wars have ended, many of these stories remain without explanation. Maybe they were just mistakes, or maybe they were proof of something we're not ready to understand. If you think phenomena like this are worth digging into, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Thanks so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.